What's poppin', players? Welcome back to a Two Penny Games review. This time, the Dead Space remake. I am your host, Tavin Bothel, here with my good friend and fellow Dead Space connoisseur, Connor Elliott.
I think connoisseur is a strong word. Enjoyer. Dead Space enjoyer.
Dead Space enjoyer is probably a little bit better. Ladies and gentlemen, I have been playing the Dead Space remake. I'll go ahead and say I haven't started, but I am, enclosing on the third act, and I'm very well versed in everything Dead Space right now. Connor, are you playing the Dead Space remake?
I am not, and I have no
You're
intention as of right now. I'm already playing Resident Evil for the game club that we'll have a review for at the end of the month, possibly, maybe even a little bit earlier. So as far as survival horror, especially with Resident Evil 4 remake coming on the end, on the back end of things, which I'm more interested in.
Yeah.
I'm not really, looking forward to playing it.
Right. However, you did just last year, I believe, or maybe the year before, played the original Dead Space.
Yeah, about at least a year ago, I played it. I did that, and then I didn't beat Dead Space 2 for some reason. I just fell off, but I basically, got to the end.
Okay.
I should beat that game back.
I was a big fan of Dead Space back in the day when it was, big and relevant and so forth. And then, I played all three games, but I haven't really touched any of them really in about a decade. I remember I picked up the original Dead Space around the same time that you were playing, but I didn't make it out of Chapter 1. So I would even hesitate to call that playing it. I have, however, made it quite deep into Dead Space Remake here, and let me say I'm in an interesting place with this game. First of all, I like it. I love it, actually. I think it's I think it's fantastically made, and I think it's phenomenal in all of the ways that Dead Space is phenomenal. If you're a fan of the original game, you should absolutely play this game. Let me start with that right there. I just think there's two ways to talk about the Dead Space Remake that I think is very, very interesting. There is how is it as a remake, and then how is it as a video game in 2023? I think both conversations end with, it's good. It's just the conversation of how is it as a remake ends with, it's awesome. Any complaints I have about this game here really are rooted in design ethos from 2008. So is it really fair to level these 2023 criticisms at a game that's almost 15 years old? I don't know. That's a conversation we can have here on this podcast right now. However, I will say from moment-to-moment gameplay, from the added story elements to this game, to the updated graphics, the updated sounds, and the improved atmosphere and just overall quality of the game, this is the definitive way to play Dead Space. And I think it straight up just replaces the original game. We're in an interesting place with remakes in general right now. You think of Final Fantasy VII Remake. You think of the Resident Evil 2 Remake. You think of Last of Us Part 1 Remake, in which we've now gotten a variety of remakes, and then even now with this Dead Space remake that run the gambit of the type of remake we can get and we can experience, where with Resident Evil 2, you see a very traditional remake in that this is the exact same game again, but in a new format that will play better to modern day audiences. Where if you go back and play the original Resident Evil 2, yeah, you're still exploring the Raccoon City Police Department. You're still going to that underground lab. And it still may be scary, but it doesn't look very good anymore. The tank controls aren't super accessible and fun to, go back and explore as they were back in the day. Whereas now with the Resident Evil 2 remake, that is a 2019 game, playable and accessible and fun from front to end, on top of the fact that it is very true to the original. And then you look at something like Final Fantasy VII, where they straight up just gave you a different game. There's a lot of there. It pretty much gives you the same story up until a point. No spoilers, but up until a point. But there's nothing about that game that you can't necessarily look at one-to-one and be like, that same game. You wouldn't be remiss for thinking it's a different game. And then you have things like The Last of Us Part 1, where the gameplay still holds up. The game is still accessible. The game is still good. And you can get it on modern consoles, but they just wanted to update it and make it look prettier. Okay, sure. That works. Here, we have something that sits more in the middle, where arguably Dead Space 1 still holds up. Dead Space 1 is still a good game. It's a little harder to get your hands on because we haven't seen any real ports outside of its generation of consoles that it originally came out on. But the core gameplay of Dead Space still works. You would agree with this, Connor? The core gameplay still works?
Yeah, Dead Space is a game, that and two, that I picked up, and it works so well in a modern setting. It plays amazingly, it runs smoothly, and it looks good as well. Like visually, it's actually kind of like amazing how well it holds up for a 2009 game. Now I play on a PC.
I was gonna say I disagree with that because my limited time of replaying the original game 2 years ago or whatever, I thought the game actually looked a little cartoony, and I found it hard to immerse myself in that world. But continue.
Yeah, I never found that to be the case. I thought it was, it looked really nice. The backgrounds were great. The environment was great. The necromorphs are designed incredibly. I mean, they became iconic when they came out, and they still are today. I mean, obviously people are, wanting more Dead Space stuff, which is why we got this remake, and it's done so well. And now we're even seeing some discussions of, hey, new Dead Space game. It's time for it. It's a game that's earned its stripes.
Yeah. So I want to say Dead Space Remake is a very tried and true traditional remake. However, it adds certain things and changes certain things to make it exciting for returning players and accessible for new players. There are elements of the original game that I know for a fact don't hold up because they weren't good when the game came out. I'm thinking specifically of the asteroid shooting segments in the original game, or the zero G gravity jumping around segments, which were awkward and discombobulating in the original game. All of that has been updated. This is almost more like the Resident Evil 1 GameCube remake, where it's the same game, but we're changing a few things around to make it better. And I feel that way with this game right here. First of all, I want to get to my two big positives about the game. The first of which is something that I think is actually truly revolutionary for survival horror as a genre. And that is, they've talked about in the marketing for this game, something called the Intensity Director. The Intensity Director is an under-the-hood system that is not explained in the game, and the player doesn't need to know about it, but if you research the game and stuff, it tells you where, as you're walking through environments that you've already been through, on return visits or backtracking or just exploring areas that you couldn't get to before, there is something like 1,200 created events that could happen. So, for example, if you walk through a room that you've already been through before, something could change. Something could be different about that room, whether it's the lights are flickering now, or the lights are completely turned off now, or Connor, you're familiar with how the necromorphs travel through the vents and, will burst out of vents and surprise you, and it's very jump scary in that way. Well, now they'll have it sometimes when you walk by a vent, there's a fan in the vent, and the fan will start whirring up and getting excessive, just to kind of dial up that tension and keep you immersed in the environments. Sometimes enemies will spawn in and they'll be there where they weren't before. I've walked through rooms where there's nothing going on, and then came literally I went through a door, went, oh, there's nothing in here, turned around, went back through that door, and there was an enemy right in my face. And I went, oh, fuck, where the fuck did you come from? Or sometimes I'll walk by a vent and a necromorph will burst out of a vent, or it'll hop through a vent that a necromorph burst out of earlier in that play session. And it's just a way to kind of keep you immersed in the game and keep you excited. It could even, I mentioned it ranged to the lights are flickering. Sometimes you'll walk through a room and you'll hear in another part of the ship somebody getting torn apart, and they're screaming and dying. And it's just a way to kind of keep that atmosphere, keep that tension alive in ways where you look at other survival horror games like Resident Evil 2 Remake, which is my favorite survival horror game of all time. And you remember exploring the Raccoon City Police Department, but once you cleared the threat out of a room, that room no longer held tension for you. You knew you were safe. Here, with the Intensity Director, you never truly know if you're safe.
You see, that's something that I've experienced in Resident Evil. the
Yeah.
remake that we've been playing, because they do the same exact thing, and it really makes those survival horror games a lot scarier because you never know when you're going to be safe. You never have that comfort because things are going to burst through the windows, new enemies spawned, so you're going to have to deal with those now. Sometimes you would get
But
items.
Connor, in that it's scripted.
Yeah, it is scripted.
It's like this room is safe until I leave the mansion and come back. Here, it's literally like I walked away for 5 minutes and came back. Like I'm still in the same story beat. Like I'm still in the same instance, which I think is just way better, and I hope it goes into every survival horror game going forward.
Yeah, I agree. It makes
That
it scarier.
and it's complemented by the devs went ahead and they've recreated the Ishimura. A lot of it is the same. Most of it is the same. The layouts in the rooms and the hallways are all the same. Which actually leads to a criticism I have, again, of the original Dead Space, where it just feels a little too linear. But they've made it to where you can now travel from one end of the Ishimura all the way to the other at any point of the game. As you're unlocking doors, of course. So, like, as you're progressing through the story and you start unlocking different areas of the ship, like medical, like hydroponics, like the crew deck, and so forth, you can go back to those areas that you've already been, where the intensity director then takes over and says, now there's new guys coming. I was going through, I believe they call it mining, the mining section of the ship, in which there's this big elevator that, like, connects a bunch of floors together. And I had already been through the area, done all the story beats. The story doesn't even make you return to this area. But I was in there exploring, unlocking doors that were locked previously, and completing side quests, which have been added to the game. And it was a thing where, like, the elevator came up, the doors are see-through, and I could see a necromorph on the other side of the door. So the door opened up, the necromorph went, I'm here, yeah. I killed the necromorph, not a big deal, I saw it coming. I then took one step outside of the elevator, turned my camera to the left, checking my corner, and there was another necromorph waiting for me in the corner. So it was like a velociraptor in Jurassic Park. It was very much like a clever girl moment where, like, here's this one that's drawing my attention, and here's this one waiting to get a hit on me. Moments like that, gorgeous. It really, really adds a level of tension that the original game just doesn't have. And I'll sing the praises of that mechanic till the day I die. I think it's fan-fucking-tastic. And being able to traverse the Ishimura at my free will adds to that and allows the intensity director to really shine in that way. So I'm really, really appreciative of that. Of course, the game looks great. It sounds great. It feels really good to play. I'll say there's very specific things that I remember. I don't know if this is true, but I remember them feeling better in the original game. The stomp specifically, the iconic Dead Space stomp, doesn't feel as satisfying as it did back in the day. But maybe that's my rose-tinted glasses on the original game. I feel the same way about the plasma cutter, which is the iconic main weapon in your arsenal. Felt better in the original game, to my memory of it. I can't confirm or deny if that's true or not. It's just what I remember.
Right.
The story has also been altered to reflect Dead Space's universe. You know, Dead Space was a huge IP when it came out. It spawned multiple sequels and spin-off games and comic books and TV shows. And, you know, they really flushed out the world of Dead Space after the success of the first game. And the changes in story have been made to reflect that. Where, you know, unitology as a concept wasn't really like a huge thing in the original game. Like, Connor, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's mentioned, but it's not like the, like, unitologists aren't the bad guy.
If I remember correctly, they are. I think there were audio stuff that you could find that was like referencing that the decisions made to lead to the disaster of the Ishimura were because unitologists were like, oh, this is a religious symbol, so we got to bring it up. That was like a back end thing that was going on. The issue is that I played Dead Space 2. I played it directly after 1, so it's kind of hard to scan that one. The Church of Unitology. What was it called again? Unitology. I wonder what that's supposed to reference. The Church of Unitology becomes a lot more important in the second
Yeah.
game. So it's kind of, I definitely probably have mixed some stuff up in between those two games, but I'm pretty confident that I remember them being in the first game and being the driving force behind the cause of everything.
Yeah, well, in here they take center stage and they are
Mm,
like the direct thing. Where like I remember Dead Space 2 having a bigger focus on unitology, and I don't remember that being the case in the first game.
yeah.
And here it's undeniably the case in the first game, where the unitologists are the problem here. Um, and all of that's great. Isaac has been given a voice. Finally, he's
The first game.
for the first game. That is, it's the same voice actor who voiced him in 2 and 3, which is appreciated. Sometimes it's great and it feels natural and organic, and especially in all of the added side quests to the game. It feels really, really good to have him talk and have his own voice and so forth. But there are some times, and usually it's with the main quest, where for some reason it just feels like tacked on dialogue. That like they're like, okay, well, this scene played fine in the original game. How do we get Isaac to say something here? All right, let's just insert this line where it still feels like characters are talking at Isaac, and then he just has like a throwaway line. But I still like that more than him not saying anything at all. I think silent protagonists are the dumbest thing we as an industry could have ever done. I can't stand silent protagonists. So I really, really, really appreciate the extra effort that they went through to incorporate Isaac as a character into this game. I mean,
he's so much more forefront of a character in the second game that it was kind of a weird shock to see him talk and be a person as opposed to a mindless, protagonist.
Yeah. And then from there, Dead Space is Dead Space, where you have that core idea of cut off the limbs, everything's broken and you got to go fix it. And you're just trying to make your way through the game and survive it. There's been some smaller changes to sort of make the systems shine a little more in this game. For example, you would be remiss in thinking that the upgrade system is exactly the same. It is not. There are now added alternate modes for each weapon, which I know the weapons initially came with like a secondary fire thing, but you can now get upgrades to sort of improve or change them even more. There are now upgrade parts that you can find throughout the Ishimura and in the store, which I made the mistake of initially prioritizing buying power nodes, which are the upgrade currency in the game, instead of buying the upgrade parts. Ladies and gentlemen, don't do that. Buy the upgrade parts. They are a little more expensive, but when you bring them to a bit, they're little parts that sit in your inventory, so they do take up an inventory spot.
Okay.
But when you bring them to a bench, the bench takes them, and you get an extra power node out of them, and it unlocks new upgrade branches for each weapon or your suit or so on and so forth. That's all really, really cool and really interesting stuff. I like the upgrade trees better in this game than they were in the original one, which I remember in the original one there was like empty nodes that you would have to spend a power node on, but they didn't give you anything. It was just kind of like forcing you to waste a node. That's gone. Every upgrade means something now. The altered modes, such as the asteroid shooting mode, which I mentioned earlier, has now been... Huh?
You despised?
I despised. I hated it. It sucked. It was
it's no problem.
annoying and frustrating. Has been changed to where you now exit the ship and go into zero gravity, and you go and like interact with one of the cannons, and then like you basically just like shoot some asteroids, but from Isaac's perspective. So it's the same aiming mechanic as it was in the core gameplay, and you basically train the cannon to fire for you, which is better. Still not great. I just think it changes it from being frustrating and annoying to now it's serviceable. Like, it's fine now. Zero gravity, where in the original game you did this like really weird and awkward and clunky Superman leap, where now you've got the rocket boots like you do in Dead Space 2 and Dead Space 3.
Reversal was way too clunky in those scenarios comparatively to what Dead Space 2 would go on to do, so it only makes sense they would update that.
Yeah.
Just like they updated the protagonist.
And again, it's better than what we had before, but I don't like it. Like, meh. Like, it's fine. Okay, it's cool. It changes up the gameplay, but I find it kind of annoying, and it's still disorienting whenever you like turn a few times, and then you're like, all right, which way's the fucking ground again? I don't remember where the ground is. They do have a button that does recenter you, but it's just kind of slow, and I just find myself less engaged when I'm in 0G, as opposed to just being on the ground. Them reworking the Ishimura to where you can traverse it. They've also added extra little like locked off rooms and stuff that weren't in the original game. So for example, and this is very like Metroidvania, almost Resident Evil, but it's very light in this way. Where as you're progressing, your security clearance gets updated and upgraded as you go. So you start out with no security clearance, and then you get level 1, level 2, level 3. And as you traverse the Ishimura, you'll find doors and lockers and containers that are locked by certain security clearances. So like you'll find a level 1 door, and then you'll get level 1 security clearance, and then you'll open that door, and it'll be more ammo and supplies and stuff. But inside there, you'll find a locker that has a level 2 lock on it. So you're like, I gotta come back here when I get level 2 eventually and open up this level 2 locker to get whatever is inside. It's mostly just kind of optional. It's not like necessary to do it, and I've never found that the rewards for backtracking are substantial enough to justify the backtrack. But it's fun, and for those who want to go and explore and really find out the depths of the intensity director, that works really well as for that purposes. I enjoy all the extra side quests that they've added to the game. One, for example, it's all like just like tacked on added stuff, but I'm enjoying that it's here. Like it's clearly like not meant to be there. And what I mean by that is it totally breaks up the pacing of the main quest entirely, because almost every step of the main quest is, Isaac, we gotta go do this right now. We're all gonna die. You have to do this right now. And then I go, okay, yeah, that's cool. Or I'm going to go like hang out on another deck for 2 hours and find rig pieces from the captain to like upgrade my security clearance. Is that cool? Cool. And they're like, where have you fucking been? They're not like actually acknowledging that you've been gone for 2 hours, but I've been gone for 2 hours. In the middle of a quest that demanded my attention immediately. Which is a little awkward, but whatever. It's like it's a game. Like let it be a video game. But this is also given the opportunity to flesh out the world of Dead Space, specifically the story scenarios that happen in the first one. There's a really, really good side quest that flushes out the backstory of the Hunter, which was the sort of like it was the necromorph that had been experimented on by a crazy doctor that could regenerate. You remember the regenerating?
Yeah.
Necromorph?
So they gave a backstory to that one then, huh?
Yeah, they gave him a backstory, and it's actually interesting and engaging and fun to explore and get those little things. Again, these are small little things. They don't take much time. They don't take much effort, but it's nice that they're there. I appreciate that they're there.
Yeah.
And they very often lead you to some extra power nodes, get some extra ammo. You often have to spend a lot of ammo to do it, so how much extra are you really getting? But, it's fun, and I appreciate that it's there, and it gives me reason as a Dead Space veteran to be excited about what's around the next corner again.
Yeah, because I mean, the Ishimura is a really nice setting. It's a perfect setting for this kind of game. So, and one of the cool things is it's, obviously everything's already gone to shit. Everyone's dead. Everything's out of whack. But there's a big story that's there to be told. I remember they made an animated movie back in the day, Dead Space something. It wasn't that good.
Or something.
No, it was something. It was not good.
Yeah.
But it at least expanded on the idea of this whole, you're on this big, space rig that just has, a multitude of people on it that now are, all dead. What happened, during that? Because it's you've all watched zombie movies. In zombie movies, there's, the group of survivors here and there. They have the different, character types in those parties, and, their decisions lead to certain outcomes. It's a whole world that wasn't really delved too deep into in the first game. It was to a certain extent, but only to like a kind of a need to know basis with some audio files to kind of supplement all that kind of stuff. So it's nice that they added these side quests. That is a really good, idea to improve the original game.
Yeah. And I guess this kind of leads into just my main critique of the game, and that is that it's a 2008 video game. Like, A lot of the environments kind of look the same. Um, a lot of the level
Always.
design is pretty linear, or just broken up by elevators. Because back in the day, they were hiding loading screens with elevators, and so instead of like figuring out a way around that, we just kind of have elevators now. Like it's not so much to hide a loading screen as it is now to just change from floor to floor. Um, okay, cool, whatever. Some of the combat it feels, I don't know, just a little stiff, but again, it's a 2008 third-person shooter. So like, am I really complaining about this? I don't know, like, because it worked back then and it still mostly works now. I do appreciate, and I had forgot how many different enemy variants there were in this game.
Yeah, there's a good amount.
There's a lot. There's so
Yeah.
many, in fact. And I had forgotten a lot of that, and I think a lot of them still work today. The boss fights don't work, and I don't know if they worked in the original or not, because so far every boss fight has been tied to those mechanics that I talked about that I didn't like. So they're very different now, but they still don't really work. They're still kind of lame.
Yeah, the boss fights were not really interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were. You kind of just shot a bunch of bullets into them. And
Yeah,
that would usually be it.
yeah, and that's still the case where you're like, except instead of like now doing the Superman jump to like avoid projectiles, you're now just like holding the left stick a little bit and going like, and then shooting a little bit, and you're like, all right, I shoot the yellow thing and it explodes, and then another thing jumps out at me and stuff. So like, the boss fights aren't great, but they weren't great to begin with. So
Yeah, it wasn't
is
able to
my
capture
if my
Resident
biggest
Evil boss
complaint about Dead Space Remake is that it's too much like the original Dead Space, which is a classic survival horror game that kept the genre alive during the PS3 generation. Is that really a complaint, or is that just, I don't know. What is like that, that's a good thing also. Like, it's a double-edged sword where like you want it to be the same, but you also want it to be different. And it's just like, how much can we change before we change too much?
Sounds like it struck a good balance.
I think it has. I think this game is fantastic. I think it changes just enough to justify a full price. I think it changes enough for veteran players, even players like yourself, Connor, to pick this up and play it and spend your time with it. Whereas I struggled to find that justification for The Last of Us Part 1. If you are looking for the Dead Space experience again, it is back and bigger and better than ever before. I remember texting you my first night and being like, Connor, Dead Space is scary again.
It's
like,
very
it is
scary.
genuinely scary. I have had so many moments of fear hit me. And again, it's because of this intensity director where like the game never breaks tension. I mean, it breaks tension, but it never stops. Like, the atmosphere is always intact. It never, like, you're never bored playing it. You're always on the edge of your seat. I think this is phenomenal. I think it's fantastic coming from EA Motive. This makes me so excited for the Iron Man game that they have play on the books to develop next. The director of this game has said that they are more than willing to continue exploring the world of Dead Space, and I absolutely think they should. Does that mean that they should remake the second game or even the third game? I don't know. Personally, I think that they should take this series in their own direction and make a new Dead Space 2. One that is, I would like it to remain survival horror if this is the route we're going. Even though I personally always liked Dead Space 2 more than Dead Space 1. In today's era, I think it makes more sense to keep it survival horror as opposed to make it more of an action game. So I'm very interested to see where they take Dead Space from here. I think the reported sales of it already show that it's a major success, and I'm so excited about that because Dead Space is back, baby, and it's better than it's ever been. Connor, have I convinced you to give Dead Space Remake a try?
Unfortunately, Tavin, no.
Because damn it!
Listen, here's the thing. I would have fun with it. I really would. And maybe down the line I'll play it when I want to visit back to it again. But I just played it, and there's so many other games I want to play. Not even just single-player games, but also multiplayer games. Getting back into some of those. So There's just and new games are gonna be coming out. Atomic Heart's right around the corner. I still haven't beaten Fire Emblem Engage. Just other things.
A lot of stuff to do right now. So I don't blame you for that. But just keep it on your radar. Like this is more than worth. This is absolutely worth revisiting. Like, I'm sure there's a bit of you that's like, I just did that. But I promise you, this is worth going back for. Where, even in our Last of Us Part 1 remake, where I was like, I like it, but because Last of Us is great. But Connor, you and I just played this, so there's no point in you going back and playing it.
Even though I would like it, because it's Last of Us, because I love that game too. But
it's not more Last of Us, where this is undeniably Dead Space again, but they've done more to it. It's not just Dead Space again. Like, there's more to it than meets the eye, and I'm very, very happy with this game, and I'm already looking at the trophy list, saying, all right, how do I get this platinum? Because I want this shit real bad. Ladies and gentlemen, that is it for the Dead Space Remake review. Thank you so much for watching and listening with us. We are also closing out episode 133, I believe. Let me check my notes. Yep. Of the Two Penny Games cast, which you can watch over at youtube.com/2pennygames every Monday, 8 a.m. Central Time, alongside every mainstream podcast service of your choice. And you can watch us record these live every Sunday at 3 p.m. Central Time, twitch.tv/2pennygames. Until next time, have a great time. Connor, say goodbye to the people.
Bye, people.